Hey, are you using
Check.
Photoshop?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 7 minutes past 2. Please take your seats so that we can start our meeting. Parties, I'm still looking for a few more voting cards.
I can send you a message when you respond and we can get started. But for now,
Nearly there.
anybody wants to speak.
Thank you, everyone. We have our quorum, so I will get started. I did indicate that we would take the first 3 summary records before we start our session today. I've had a plea for a little bit more time. So I will take the first summary record now, and I will take the next 2 tomorrow morning. So turning to CoP19 Committee 2, Record 1, which was published yesterday. United States.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a couple of edits to Summary Records COP19 COM2 Rec 1. So under agenda item 7.6 on the Sponsored Delegates Project. Apologies, give me just a moment to get my thoughts together. Thank you.
I might go to the EU while you do that. United States, EU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. When I think it's for this comment for this one, but also for all the others, summary records, just to refer whenever the European Union is mentioned, that took the floor to mention the European Union and its member states, apart from in the context of the working groups, of course, where there is a list of participants, then it can be only European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. Noted. United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies for that. We did, in fact, need more time. So with regard to the Sponsored Delegates Project, after the sentence that ends with expressed disappointment at the lack of funding to allow more delegates from developing countries to participate, we would note that the United States also expressed support for the Sponsored Delegates Project, the draft decision, and the amendments with respect to gender balance, and suggested that UNEP should. So I can read that again, if that would be helpful.
Yes, and if you could just point out for everyone's benefit exactly where in the paragraph you are.
Sure. So in the English version, this is the second, it's the second paragraph, second sentence. And so our amendment would read, instead of referencing the European Union and the United States of America, we would strike the United States of America from that sentence and then add a new sentence that reads, the United States also expressed support for the Sponsored Delegates Project, the draft decision, and the amendments with respect to gender balance, and suggested that UNEP should consider waiving administrative costs for the SDP. And then further down in that same paragraph, the sentence that reads currently, it's the last sentence in that paragraph, it currently reads, the United States proposed the retention of Decision 18.12. We'd like to add to the end of that sentence, and noted that it saw merit in incorporating paragraph A of Decision 18.12 into Resolution Conf 17.3. And then we have, I believe we have one more edit. Oh, apologies. That is the extent of our edits. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. Okay, seeing no more comments on summary record 1, we will turn back to CoP19 Doc 66.7, which we were discussing before our break. Before we move on, and I had 3 speakers left on my list, so I will ask them, I'm not opening the floor yet, I will ask them to speak in a moment. I did hear in the opening discussion, though, both Malawi, who introduced the document, and the United States of America, who spoke after them, refer to a new draft decision directed to the Standing Committee. But I didn't hear any language, and I didn't hear particular detail about what that new decision might be. So I thought it might be helpful for someone to describe what the new draft decision might include. I don't think we're in a position to hear brand new language, but I wondered, Malawi, are you in a position to give your colleagues a little bit more information about the new draft decision you envisage directed to the Standing Committee? Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. Basically, the document which we are proposing in terms of additional amendments in terms of instruction. First of all, there is a part directed to the Secretariat, 19A. Under Part A, we have added some words based on the terms of reference developed under Decision 19BB. We have shared this document with we share with the Secretariat.
Thank you, Malawi. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Malawi, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I think it will be very difficult to discuss actual language amendments of your amended and new draft decisions at the moment, but I thought it might be helpful so that the parties can understand if they might be interested in working further on your language. If you could just describe the nature particularly of your new draft decision, the one that I'm aware you're interested in directing to the Standing Committee. If you could tell us what that might be about, how it might change things, then I'll be able to see what the parties think about that and decide how we might move forward.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go specifically those which are directed to the Standing Committee. Basically, one, we are proposing to establish an intercession working group at the Standing Committee 76, and also provide the working group where the terms of reference will be presented, draft terms of reference for SC 77 for consideration, and also providing for the Standing Committee to review and adopt the terms of reference as developed by the working group. And also, Part D, the Standing Committee shall review the consultant's report called for in Decision 19AA, and will determine if further evaluation of the NEA process is needed, and if so, to outline any elements requiring further evaluation. And then Part E, the Standing Committee shall prepare a report along with recommendations for updating the NEA process for consideration by the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. So what I understand from Malawi is that in addition to the proposal, Malawi is proposing a new draft decision directed to the Standing Committee, which would establish a Standing Committee intersessional working group who would be responsible for developing the terms of reference for the review of the National Ivory Action Plan process. And so that working group would draft the terms of reference, and at Standing Committee 77, the Standing Committee would review the work of that working group in terms of the development of the terms of reference, and at that point the Secretariat would engage the consultant to undertake the review. So I will open my floor, but I will take the following 3 parties first because they were still on my list. So I will take Togo, followed by Mali, followed by Cambodia. If any of those parties are here and would like the floor, I'm not going to force you, but Togo, I can see you. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to state that Togo supports the proposals put forward by Malawi, Senegal, and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. Do I have Mali or Cambodia wanting the floor? Cambodia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Related to the NIP implementation of Cambodia, we would like to report to the Conference of Parties that Cambodia already up to date. We do the ivory stockpile inventory for almost 65% of the stockpile that we confiscated. And by the end of this year, there will be around 90% of the stockpile that we confiscated will be inventory, proper inventory by the in accordance with the CITES recommended format. That's one, and also we do the related to the domestic elephant registration. We expect to complete by the end of next year or so. All of that achievement, what we do, we thank to the European Commission and the UNODC that provide technical and material to implement this one. So thank you, and this is the report of Cambodia related to the NIP implementation in Cambodia.
Thank you, Cambodia. So I will start to open my list. I'll just remind you of our discussions before lunchtime. So we had heard from Malawi that they were introducing the document and that they had supported the amendments proposed by the Secretariat. We heard from the US, who's also a proponent on the paper, that they did not support the amendment proposed by the US in Decision 19, the amendment proposed by the Secretariat in Decision 19AA to strike out the requirement to construct a consultant to undertake the work. And then we have heard from Malawi this afternoon, that they would like to also propose a new draft decision. I understand that that's a lot, and I've asked Malawi not to introduce the language but to describe the concept, because I would like to understand whether or not there is an appetite to pursue the new draft decision on top of what we see here, because that will help me decide where we might go from here. So I have opened my floor. I see European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We thank the proponents for this document. Generally speaking, we support a very strong and effective NIAP process as an essential tool to address illegal ivory trade. Therefore, we support an external review of the process with a view to strengthening the process of national ivory action plans. So while we support the general objective of the document, we also would like to see a focused review that would be as concrete, problem-oriented, and issue-specific as possible. Therefore, in our view, the review should be linked to and focused on some of the issues that have been identified in the document in para 7. We would not support a review of the entire process, nor a general review of all aspects of the NIAP guidelines. Fix what needs to be fixed, but don't try to fix what is not broke. Along those lines, the EU and its member states note that the proposed decisions in the original proposal, in particular on the proposed terms of reference in 19AA, do not yet reflect fully the rationale for the review as was specified in para 7 of the document. In addition, the set of decisions in the document, and in particular 19AA I, seems to imply that the review would be about whether a review should be done, meaning a regular review process of NIAPs, and about aligning with existing tools, but not so much about a review of the actual process. So in our view, the terms of reference should be reworded so to clearly link them to paragraph 7 of the document. And from the list in para 7, we would support a review on items 7C, D, E, and H, but not on F, G, and I. Now, on the developments from this morning, we understand that Malawi wishes to mandate the Standing Committee with the task of developing TORs for the review. Rather than burdening the Standing Committee with yet another task, we would like to suggest to rather work on TORs for the review here at the COP. In addition, we also wonder how the new suggestion by Malawi relates to the old 19AA directed to the Secretariat, which in our reading was also foreseeing a mandate and substantive terms of reference, in a sense, for the review. So we would like to have some clarification on that point. I could now also go into a discussion of which items of para 7 we support and for what reason, and we would also be ready to propose language for possible terms of reference for review, but I will perhaps pause here and see how you want to proceed with, or how the room wants to proceed with this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union, and thank you for pausing. I am starting to get the sense, both with Malawi's new proposal and your thoughts on perhaps drafting in terms of reference here, that we might need a small drafting group. And so I will ask you to hold your language, if that's okay, if you're comfortable with that. I've got 3 more speakers on my board. I will take those 3 speakers because, as I said, I promised to flag as soon as I think that we might need a working group or a drafting group so that we don't spend all of our energy here on language. So I will take Singapore, followed by Mali, followed by the United Kingdom, and then I will come back to you. Singapore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ResConf 10.10 was last substantially revised during COP17 and COP18 to address the various issues and gaps in the National Ivory Action Plan process. We have seen countries working closely with the CITES Secretariat to improve, strengthen and implement substantial enforcement measures to combat illegal wildlife trade. It's not a paper exercise, and CITES Secretariat has carried out missions to countries to observe their enforcement measures firsthand. The primary concern and rationale for the proposal was due to the fact that some countries consistently fail to submit progress reports. As we can see in the issues discussed in the application of Article 13, there are parties who fail to comply in implementing required measures as well. This issue of non-compliance is not unique to the NIAP process. Singapore can support a review, however, contracting a consultant to undertake the review will increase the budgetary pressure. Therefore, we agree with the CITES Secretariat's comments and propose amendments in 19AA. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Singapore. Mali, you have the floor.
Merci bien.
Thank you, Madam. We had some problems with our card earlier, but fortunately the technicians came to the rescue, for which thanks. There's one point we wanted to highlight. There's a very important NIAP issue. The whole process has been underway for 10 years and there has been no evaluation, and it could be helpful to help the states involved. What we want to do today, and that is what Malawi, Senegal, and the United States are looking at in this proposal, we want to ensure that our states have a good understanding of NIAPs and make the best possible use of them, as if we need to understand what has been accomplished and how the process can be helpful. Otherwise, states are not in a position to produce the documents required, and that means that the difficulties or problems don't get solved. We think it would be good to find a way of ensuring that NIAPs are well understood and better implemented to everyone's advantage. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mali. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, we'll be brief. We align ourselves with the views expressed by Malawi and the United States on the draft decisions proposed in CoP19.66.7, including the proposal for the development of terms of reference for the review. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Thank you, everyone. I've indicated I think we might need a group, so I'm going to limit the. I do want to hear from observers to observe if I can, before I come back and formulate my thoughts. So I have EIA and EIA. You have the.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As this time we are to the floor, we thank Panama for a warm welcome and congratulate you on your election as chair of this. This intervention is made on behalf of the EIA, CS, UF, for biological diversity, for animals, pro-wildlife, Fondation CITES, David Wildlife Foundation, Foundation France Weber, Robin des Bois, Animal Institute, Born Free, SSN, Society International, Aid Foundation, SL. The process has resulted in several developments in parties responsible for poaching and trafficking, including legislative reform by recognizing trafficking as a serious crime. It has been nearly a decade since the process began. An independent review is therefore and an opportunity to ensure the process continues the goals of Res 1010, Rev CoP19, conservation. Therefore, support the amendment 19.6.7 called for by Malawi, Senegal, and the United States of America to continue strengthening the NIAP process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EIA UK. Traffic, you have the floor.
Thank you. Traffic fully supports the draft decisions to undertake review of NIAP process with a view to improving its effectiveness and compliance, particularly welcomes any actions that would strengthen transparency, accountability, monitoring, and compliance process by the country. And traffic notes CITES report CoP19 that better definitions of the criteria for the assessment of parties requiring action under the process as categories A, B, or C, or warrant, in particular, what affected, market affected, and affected may mean in terms of quantifiable trade characteristics. Guidance or criteria for interpretation of the ET analysis results in the context of identifying parties attending the NIAP process should be developed by the MIC tag in consultation with Secretariat and evaluation of the criteria for into or exit from the process should also be part of the proposed review. Thank you, Chair.
Traffic. So I would like to do now, because we have two different approaches we could take at this, because I think we do need a working group, or at least a drafting group. Two different proposals on the floor. We have the proposal from Malawi, supported by the United States, which is the draft decision that we have in front of us, plus the new decision Malawi has decided to us this afternoon. We don't have the language review, but hopefully a sense of their intention, which is to task the standing committee developing terms of reference for the review. And the European Union has proposed that it would be a good idea to have a working group to draft the terms of reference at this meeting. So, technicians, if you clear my list, I'm going to try something different, because I think we might be able to achieve this with a show of hands. And I mean, press your button. Thank you. If you have parties in considering draft terms of reference at this meeting, I'd like you to press your button so I can draft terms of reference for the NIAP at the meeting working group. Probably more than one working group, everyone. Technicians, can you just scroll so I can see? Thank you. Thank you, technicians. You can clear the list. I just wanted to... All right, thank you everyone for your patience. As I'd flagged, I do see the need for a working group on this document, and raising your hands by pressing a button indicated to me that there is a good amount of support for considering developing the terms of reference for the NIAP review at this meeting. So what I would like to do, of parties requesting the floor, Senegal, do you have a comment on the concept of me establishing a working group before I explain what I would like them to consider doing?
Thank you, Madam. It was just to support what you seem to be proposing, that is to have such a working group. We would be in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. So I'm going to strike a working group to consider drafting the terms of reference for the review of the National Ivory Action Plan process, and if agreed, to develop the terms of reference. If that group, in their deliberations and their consideration of our discussions here today, opts not to develop the terms of reference, and I will leave the group to have that discussion, then I would ask that working group to, on the basis of document 66.7 and on the proposed new decision from Malawi, who I'm sure will provide their language to the working group, to prepare a set of new draft decisions on the National Ivory Action Plan process review for consideration by the committee. So I will shortly take membership of that working group. It would be nice to keep it small. Terms of reference, should the group decide to do that, it's a task. United States, is it a question or is it a joining the working group flag? Thank you, United States. Okay, so parties first. Observers, I will take you second, just so the list don't get too confused. Parties who would like to participate in the working group I've just described. Okay, on my list, I have, and please don't press any more, please stop pressing and unpressing your buttons, otherwise I'm not going to get you right. I will read the parties that I have in my list now, my static list, and then I'll have the list cleared, and if I've missed anyone, then you can add yourself later. I will take other lists. So I have on my static list, please hold fire. Please don't press your buttons. Senegal, United States of America, Belgium, European Union, Germany, United Kingdom, Japan, China, Kenya, Singapore, Cambodia, Thailand, Angola. Thank you, technicians. You can clear that list. If I didn't read your name out just then and you would like to be on the working group parties, I'll give you one more chance. Malawi, Malaysia, Vietnam, Czech Republic. So if I just read your country name out, you can press your button again. We have recorded you. Malawi, Vietnam, Czech Republic, Ethiopia. Thank you, Ethiopia, we have you. European Union. Did you want the floor? We do have you. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be sure what the mandate of this working group is, we were under the impression that the decision was that we would develop the TORs here, but then we are not sure whether you added also the decisions proposed by Malawi, which actually assume a different approach to the mandate of the working group, which brings me to the question whether we would, in the working group, then also discuss again which approach to take, or whether we would develop the TORs. Thanks for clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. Yes, what I would like to do is limit too much back and forth about the merits of the terms of reference here. So my first request to the working group is to consider whether or not they want to draft the terms of reference here. So that would be my first point of call, and my recommendation to the working group would obviously be to consider that first. I do see a good amount of interest in doing so from amongst the parties that have joined the working group, but I would like that to be decided by that working group. Obviously for the parties to decide. And obviously if that's the will of the working group, then to work on the terms of reference. So I would be hopeful that that would be a decision taken quite quickly. If there's not a will, then I would like you to take a look at those decisions. Is that clear? Thank you. Observers, I will take membership for this working group. Okay, I see WWF, EIA UK, WCS, Amboseli, and Traffic. If I've said your name, you can take yourself off the list. We have you. IUCN. Yeah. WCS, we have you. Okay, thank you everyone. I would like to ask the European Union, or perhaps one of their member states, if they might be willing to chair this working group. Noted there's a few member states on the working group, as well as the European Union. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for entrusting us with that task. We could propose to have Belgium as one of the member states to chair the working group, if that's agreeable for everyone. Thank you.
Certainly agreeable to me. Okay, thank you, European Union, and thank you, Belgium, for agreeing. So we will make arrangements for that working group. We will move on to CoP19 document 21, review of the CITES program. This document has been submitted by the Standing Committee, and I will let Belgium run. We'll give you a moment, Belgium. Just take the floor when you're ready. Thank you, Belgium. Belgium is introducing this document. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, and apologies for the delay. So, this report on the review of CITES, the CITES program, Working Document 21, has been submitted by the Standing Committee. At COP18, decisions 18.18 to 18.20 were adopted on a review of the Elephant Trade Information System. At SC70, the terms of reference for the CITES review were adopted, including the issues of overlapping reporting requirements. At SC74, the report by the Secretariat on the CITES review was discussed, and a set of recommendations are now for consideration of the parties here. The CITES review rated the overall performance of CITES as satisfactory. While it was noted that CITES was initially not designed for this, it was determined that it provides parties with analytical outputs to inform compliance processes such as the NIAP process. Certain recommendations of the review can be addressed by the following suggested amendments. Amendments to ResConf 10.10, Ref COP 18 on trade in elephant specimens, and Annex 1 of this resolution are needed to address several issues, such as the facilitation of data exchange between CITES, the CITES Secretariat, and the IQIC partners, and the scope of data to be submitted by parties by including minimum data requirements. The issues about data governance, mechanisms for data collection, and increased oversight by the MIC-CITES stack were also addressed, as well as the alignment of reporting dates of CITES and the annual illegal trade report. The need for regular funding was also highlighted. These amendments are suggested in Annex 1 of the document. Amendments are also suggested to ResConf 11.17, Ref COP 18, on national reports to facilitate the exchange of data on seizures of elephant specimens between CITES, the CITES Secretariat, and the IQIC partners. These can be found in Annex 2 of the document. Besides these suggested amendments, the Standing Committee was also requested to prioritize the recommendations in the review report and prepare a costed action plan for the implementation of these actions. 16 recommendations are considered as high priority, 4 as medium priority, and 5 as low priority. The overview of the prioritized recommendations can be found in Annex 3. The Standing Committee recommended that, provided funding can be secured, implementation should focus on the high and medium priorities. The estimated one-off costs linked to the implementation of high and medium priority recommendations is $40,000, with an additional annual cost of $67,500. This does not include the normal funding of CITES, nor the development of the resource mobilization strategy that the Secretariat has been mandated to develop. The relevant set of draft decisions on the implementation of the priority recommendations from the review of CITES can be found in Annex 4. Parties are also requested to consider making available the data used in the CITES analysis. Together with the code for the CITES analysis, which is already made available, This would enhance the transparency of the entire process. In this regard, I'd also like to mention the information document submitted by the Secretariat on behalf of Traffic, clarifying the process on data collection and processing, explaining how data is included in CITES, which can be found in InfDoc number 40. The Conference of the Parties is now invited to A. Adopt the amendments to Resolution Conf 10.10 Ref CoP18 on trade in elephant specimens contained in Annex 1 of the present document. The COP is also invited to adopt the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.17 Ref CoP18 on national reports contained in Annex 2 of the present document. Furthermore, the COP is requested to consider and agree to the prioritization of recommendations as contained in Annex 3 to the document, and to adopt the draft decisions relating to the implementation of the prioritized recommendations contained in Annex 4 of the present document. And lastly, the COP is requested to consider the deletion of decisions 18.18 to 18.20 because they have been implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium, on behalf of the Standing Committee. So parties, with your indulgence, I thought we might invite just a very brief comment from Traffic on this before we begin our discussions. I don't see any objection to that. So Traffic, you have the floor.
No?
Now it's on.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Traffic appreciates the conclusions by the external review that the CITES analysis is data-driven and qualitative in its core, that Traffic is objective in its use of available data and analytics approach, and that the overall performance of the CITES program is satisfactory to support decision-making by the parties. Traffic agrees with recommendations in Doc 21, except for the change of date of submission of CITES data to be October 31st. We support suggestions made by some parties during discussions on previous agenda items today to maintain the 31st of March submission deadline of CITES data, as we have concerns that a date change will have impacts on the timeliness and the quality of the data available for the CITES analysis. We thank the Secretariat and the Mike CITES tag for their guidance in prioritization of the CITES review recommendations, and we look forward to working together on their implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. So parties, the floor is open. Thank you. I see the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the review of the ETIS programme and the recommendations coming out of the review for further improving the system. The UK supports adoption of all but one of the proposed amendments to Resolutions 1010 and 1117 and the draft decisions as amended by the Secretariat to address the findings of the ETIS review. We also support adoption of the Secretariat's draft decisions to develop criteria for the categorisation of parties based on the ETIS analysis and seizure data. We note and share the concerns expressed by Traffic and other parties earlier today regarding the implications of changing the due date of ETIS data to the 31st of October. We agree that we consider that this risks an increased time lag between data submission and it being included in a report to the Standing Committee or Conference of the Parties. We therefore do not support the proposed amendment to Annex 1 of ResConf 1010 to add a due date of 31st of October for reporting ETIS seizure data to Traffic. Parties should continue to be encouraged to report within 90 days of the seizure and by 31st of March at the latest for seizures in the preceding year. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I see Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the deadline date of the ETC report, there might be difficulty in changing, especially for developing countries due to increasing cost. If so, Japan can accept not to change the deadline. The next comment is based on the information document 56 from Japan, so please refer to it. After careful consideration of the document proposed by the Standing Committee and to ensure the effectiveness of data governance, Japan thinks that the process should include a verification of transparency and engagement of the related parties. Therefore, Japan proposes to revise to the amendments to resolutions and draft decisions as follows. First, in Res. Conf 1010 Rev. CoP19 Annex 1, Paragraph 2, in the paragraph starting with "in addition to the seizure data," after the phrases "as necessary to improve the analysis and the resulting output and the interpretation," period, insert a sentence as follows. The Secretariat will consult to the MIC-ETIS subgroup of the Standing Committee, such revise and update and explain how to parties to access such subsidiary data and how the data is scientifically rigorous, material, relevant, and impartial, period.
Japan, may we have that again a little bit slower? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, in Annex Paragraph 5, in the last paragraph, after the phrases will be made available to all parties, period, insert a sentence as follows. The Secretariat shall consult to the MIC-ETIS subgroup of the Standing Committee such statistical methodology, underlying code and supporting documentation and respond to the inquiries by the parties, including parameters, period. Next, in Resolution Conf 1010 Rev. CoP18 Paragraph 27G, in the last part, after the phrases "under appropriate non-disclosure agreements," insert phrases as follows. And, compliance with obligations under data use agreement with information users, including the ICCWC, the use of data and published results will be appropriately monitored by the Secretariat and reported to the parties. And lastly, regarding the draft decisions, we propose to amend as follows. 19AA, subject to external funding, the Secretariat shall reveal the current practical criteria for categorization of NIA process, including scrutinizing case study from the perspective of examining the validating criteria, submit the report to the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee for consideration, and establish the intersessional working group to agree the terms of reference, the work of developing new criteria, period. 19BB, the Secretariat shall, in consultation with the MIC-ETIS Technical Advisory Group and Traffic, in accordance with the terms of reference in Decision 19AA, develop the draft criteria for the categorization of parties based on the ETIS analysis and the seizure data relating to the elephant specimens submitted to traffics. Invite parties to review the draft criteria and comments on it, and compile the views from parties and submit the draft criteria to the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee for consideration, period. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I'm afraid we did not get all of your language up here, but I think we understand the concepts. So I will come back to you in some form to get your language. I will take some more comments from the floor. I see the European Union.
Thank you very much, Chair. We think every good program can benefit from a review after a certain amount of time. And we were reassured to see that the ETIS overall performance is deemed satisfactory and that the ETIS analysis can indeed support CITES processes and decision-making. We can support almost all recommendations, including the editorial changes suggested by the CITES Secretariat related to Resolution Conf 1010 revised by CoP18, except for the change in the submission date for ETIS data. Similarly to what Traffic and UK mentioned earlier, we are of the opinion that regarding after having analyzed these data, which became available, on repercussions of the alignment of the deadline for submission of data to ETIS and the illegal trade reports, we have reconsidered our earlier position on this, and we are convinced that this would weaken the process due to the time lag that would arise between the data used in the ETIS analysis and their reporting to the COP. Therefore, we oppose the addition to Annex 1, second paragraph. We do, however, support the strengthening of cooperation between IQIC and ETIS and the sharing of data from the annual illegal trade report with ETIS, provided the annual illegal trade data meet the minimal requirements of reporting to ETIS. We want to take this opportunity to advocate also for more transparency in the process by making the data used in the ETIS analysis available, as mentioned in Recommendation 16. Furthermore, we call upon parties to make sure the necessary financial resources are made available for ETIS to continue its important work. The EU and its member states also support the draft decisions 19AA and 19BB as proposed by the CITES Secretariat on the development of criteria for categorization of parties based on the ivory seizure data. We are of the view this will improve the NIA process and make it more transparent. Regarding the proposal as presented by Japan in their informal document number 56 and now orally in the meeting, we do not align ourselves with this proposal. Regarding amendments to Resolution Conf 1010, revised COP18, and also the proposals to amend the draft decisions. We think that these elements have been discussed and explained previously, and that these proposed additions are not necessary. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, European Union, and thank you for also reflecting on your colleagues' proposed amendments. I will take several more parties. I see China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, we want to thank the Secretariat and the two consultants for doing this ETIS review, which is obviously a very large workload. And we found that many of the suggestions that make amendments according to the findings of this review useful. But still we have some suggestion. Regarding amendments to ResConf 1010, China cannot accept two additions. One is the requirement for submission domestic seizure data, as it is beyond the scope of CITES. And the other one is a grant for ETIS to interpret data. We can accept that ETIS analyzes the data, but we cannot accept ETIS to interpret data. So China suggests these two additions be deleted. And China further suggests the Secretariat or Traffic shall be responsible for the verification of data rather than the parties. Data should not be used for analysis until the parties agree so doing. China supports the amendments to ResConf 1117. However, we do not support the establishment of every stockpile database as recommended in Annex 3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, China. I see the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to the amendments of ResConf 10.10 Rev COP 18, the United States supports the proposed language in Annex 1 with one exception and the amendments proposed by the Secretariat. These changes provide necessary clarification to issues involving the management, analysis, and the use of the EDA data. Similar to Traffic UK and others, we do not support changing the EDIS report deadline from March 31st to October 31st, and note the EDIS review recommendations that timely seizure data reporting by the parties is absolutely crucial in order for traffic to produce quality science-based estimates of trends. In regards to the amendments of ResComp's 11.17 RevCop 18, the United States supports the proposed language in Annex 2. This would facilitate data sharing between EDIS and IQIC, which manages the illegal trade report data submitted annually by CITES parties. In regards to the implementation priorities, the United States agrees with the prioritization of recommendations found in Annex 3 and supports the draft decisions found in Annex 4, which would focus on implementing high and medium priority items as funding becomes available. In regards to the EDIS classification criteria, we support the Secretariat's draft decisions directing the Secretariat and the Standing Committee to develop clear guidance and criteria for how countries are classified in EDIS as Category A, B, or C. This work is consistent with the high priority recommendations found in the EDIS review in Annex 3. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I see Singapore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Singapore would like to thank the Standing Committee for preparing the report and thank the independent consultants on the full review report. The review had confirmed concerns which Singapore raised previously on the ET's methodology, including the implications of making assumptions, the implications of using weak proxy variables, and the effect of each proxy variable. The cluster analysis used in the methodology remains unclear and subjective. Justifications are still lacking on whether the decisions surrounding the clustering were based on previous year's reports or particular statistical criterion. The sensitivity analysis performed in the latest iteration of the clustering model also vindicated our concerns on the uncertainty of the estimates. Hence, we urge ETs to exercise caution when using said results. ETs should continue to increase transparency and improve data collection. It should not embrace a methodology that is prone to subjective modeling, assumption, and variability. Any change made to the model and model results estimated in each update should be published and made known to all parties. Transparency cannot be hindered by capacity constraints. Singapore would like to stress the importance of communicating the assumptions and limitations of the analysis clearly to all parties. Singapore would like to take this opportunity to also share our experience in the use of ETIS online. As indicated in the review paper SC74.12, countries can easily access, download, or upload seizure data and verify if they've been implicated in the illegal ivory trade. However, there is no procedure for removal of seizure data which is inaccurate or not verifiable. During Singapore's attempt to verify the seizure data, either there was no response from other countries or countries did not have any information. For example, there is seizure data leading back to 2014 which implicated Singapore and was recently uploaded onto ETIS online. Singapore contacted the country to verify the seizure data, but was informed that they were unable to provide any information in view that that happened in 2014. This concern was conveyed to CITES Secretariat and Traffic, but we were informed that records can only be amended by the party that submitted the seizure data, and that there's nothing Traffic can do to amend the records. This again highlights the flaws of the analysis since the quality and validity of the data used are questionable. Singapore would like to emphasize the importance of data verification and the accuracy of data used in ET's analysis as it impacts the determination of parties to be included in the National Ivory Action Plan. In addition, as reiterated by Singapore in our report submitted to SC69, SC70, and SC71, the analysis should take into consideration circumstances and context of the parties, including parties' existing measures, and whether the inclusion of parties to the National Ivory Action Plan will bring about significant impact beyond the measures already put in place by the party. We recognize that ETs does not always have the benefit of full information or timely submission of seizure information, and this would affect data quality. Singapore echoes the views of parties like the EU and the UK that moving the deadline will have a serious lag time on data analysis. Singapore supports the deletion of the additional line or by 31st October each year in CoP19 Doc 21 Annex 1 Paragraph 4. Parties should submit their seizure information timely within 90 days of their occurrence. Ultimately, this is about having a tool that is accurate, fair, and transparent, and it's also about recognizing the limitations of the statistical model and assumption and proxies that are used. In conclusion, the ultimate aim of ET's review is to ensure that ET's analysis will be understood, accepted, and used confidently and appropriately by the parties in the fulfillment of the requirements set out in Resolution Conf 10.10, unquote. Singapore would like to reiterate the importance of the ET's analysis being fair, robust, transparent, and scientifically sound. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Singapore. I'm closing my party list. I've had 2 parties waiting for some time and 2 newer parties. I'll reiterate my request from this morning that we keep our interventions very brief. We are almost 1 full day behind now, so I would like to try to catch up some this afternoon. So I will take brief interventions. Please reflect on what your colleagues have said if you can, from Namibia, followed by Malaysia.
Thank you, Chairperson. We thank the Standing Committee for submitting document CoP19, Doc 21. Namibia generally supports the amendment to Resolution Conf 10.10, Rev CoP18, contained in Annex 1 of the document, including editorial changes by the Secretariat. Like the EU, UK, Singapore, and others, we oppose changing the current ETIS data submission deadline from 31st of March to 31st of October, as this will result in less timely information to inform the ETIS analysis and reports. We suggest revision should adhere to the existing guidelines in Annex 1 of the Resolution Conf 10.10, and in the annual notifications by the Secretariat, where parties should inform on seizures and confiscation of ivory and elephant specimens within 90 days of their occurrence and no later than 31 March of the following year. Chairperson, we are worried that the proposed change in the deadline is likely to negatively impact data quality and data management efficiency. The current deadline has worked for us thus far, as it has led to the production of good analytical ETIS report by traffic. Namibia therefore requests this meeting to maintain the current deadline of 31st of March for ETIS data submission. I submit, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Namibia. Malaysia.
Oops. Madam Chair, Malaysia supports the comments of the Secretariat laid out in the present document. Malaysia also supports the prioritization of recommendations as contained in Annex 3 and draft decisions in Annex 4 to the present document. As laid out in Annex 3, incorporation of ET's online notification enabling data validation workflow, which include adding an automated notice every time a record is added for each party, or if a record is queried by an affected or implicated party, and notifying all affected parties. Malaysia is one of the parties who has experienced unfavorable situation because of this issue. The situation is even worse when it involves data from open source, such as from newspaper articles that needs to be verified. Malaysia is of the view that improvements to the ETS program should be expedited to address issues of data integrity as well as other issues which have been raised by parties in previous meetings. As to the matter pertaining to clustering of parties and importance of being able to undertake verification of data, Malaysia will not go into detail, as Singapore has deliberated at length, and Malaysia fully supports their intervention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. I have 2 more parties on my list. I will take very brief interventions from Indonesia, followed by Israel. Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia supports the decision and agrees to improve the guidelines 10.10. Indonesia reminds that in data collection process to involve and coordinate with the parties or CITES authority for data validation and also avoid complaints from parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia and Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Quickly saying Israel wishes to support the position of the United States to keep the 31st of March as a day to submit data to CITES to ensure the most useful and timely information factored into CITES analysis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I will take one or two observers very briefly because I think we've come to a landing here amongst the parties. So I will take WWF. You have the floor.
The ETIS analysis is a key tool to inform understanding of illicit ivory trade and a vital resource supporting decision-making by parties. WWF welcomes the overall findings of the review. However, we would like to align with concerns raised during today's discussions by the European Union, Kenya, Namibia, Singapore, the United Kingdom, United States and others, as well as traffic on proposed changes to reporting that could have unintended negative consequences for the quality of the analysis. We encourage parties to consider these implications and ensure that the ETIS analysis continues to provide a robust and invaluable resource to inform decision-making here at CITES and more widely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, WWF. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for that discussion. I think we have landed largely in support for the document. So I will run through the recommendations one by one so we're all clear. So I think that we, in general, have agreed to adopt the amendments to Resolution Conf 1010 Rev CoP 18 on trade in elephant specimens and its Annex 1 contained in Annex 1 to the present document, with the amendments from the Secretariat, with the exception of Section 4, Paragraph 2, with the language insert changing the submission date to the 31st of October each year. What I'm hearing is that parties would like to maintain that date as the 31st of March. So given that the 31st of March is not actually written into this resolution, I would propose that we would actually just change 31 October to 31 March to formalise that as the submission date. I'll take nods to see if everybody agrees that I've captured what you're trying to achieve. I can see nods there. In addition to the Secretariat's Secretariat's amendments to Resolution Conf 1010, I've also heard good support for their new draft decisions 19AA and 19BB around developing the criteria for characterisation. I've heard universal support for that. Recommendation B, I think that we agree to adopt the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.17 Rev CoP 18 on national reports contained in Annex 2 to the present document. I think that we agree to consider and agree to the prioritisation of recommendations as contained in Annex 3 to the present document. I heard a few reflections on that. I think that we agree to recommend that the COP adopt the draft decisions relating to the implementation of the prioritised recommendations contained in Annex 4. I didn't see any edits on those. And I think we agree that the COP delete decisions 18.18 to 18.20 that have been implemented. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to our next document, we have CoP19 document 22, Mike and ETIS programs. This document has been prepared by the Standing Committee, and I understand that Belgium will also introduce this document. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document 22 on the Mike and ETIS programs has been prepared by the Standing Committee. At COP18, decisions 18.21 and 18.22 on the Mike and ETIS programs were adopted. These decisions directed the Secretariat to develop a proposal on possible approaches to address financial and operational sustainability of the Mike and ETIS programs for consideration of the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee then shall review this proposal and make recommendations to the 19th Conference of the Parties. At SC 74, the Standing Committee noted and supported the following approaches proposed by the Secretariat to address the financial and operational sustainability of the Mike and ETIS program. Point A, the incorporation of the Mike and ETIS programs in a resource mobilization strategy to be developed by the Secretariat. Item B, identification of key elements of support and analytical capacity to be integrated in the core budget of the Secretariat. Element C, preparation of proposals for support to the Mike program for consideration by donors. D, further exploration of the options to secure support from alternative funding sources, such as the private sector and through crowdfunding. And lastly, E, the continued enhancement of operational performances, including improvements to the Mike online database and online training, and identifying and implementing cost-effective approaches to deliver on Mike objectives. The Standing Committee further noted that 3 multi-year projects in support of the Mike program will come to an end in 2023 or 2024, and that the Secretariat was unable to secure funds to support the implementation of Mike in South Asia. If funding cannot be secured in the year to come, the Secretariat may not be able to meet the responsibilities assigned to them in ResConf 10.10 Ref COP18, which will directly impact the objectives of the Mike program. The Standing Committee encouraged donors and parties to provide funds to the CITES Secretariat to support Mike implementation in Africa and Asia. The Conference of the Parties is now invited to adopt the draft decisions relating to the financial and operational sustainability of the Mike and ETIS programs contained in Annex 1 to the present document. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. On behalf of the Standing Committee, parties, the floor is open. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We share the concerns on the long-term viability of both Mike and ETIS. And these programs are dependent on external funding, and it's a continuous worry if adequate financing will be found. A long-term funding mechanism should be developed. We fully support the set of decisions allowing the Secretariat to explore options to secure support, as well as ways to improve the functioning of the Mike program. And we echo the call for all parties and organizations to support elephant range states and provide resources for the Mike and ETIS programs. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I see Togo. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given everything that the MIC program does for range states, particularly with respect to capacity building and logistics support, we share the concerns expressed in this document. And we really do feel that MIC should get support that will enable it to implement its program in the range states. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Togo. United States.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports the adoption of the draft decisions 19.AA, 19.BB, with the Secretariat's amendments, and 19.CC. We acknowledge the Secretariat's recommendations to not adopt Decision 19.AA, but we do not support this suggestion. We believe that the specific decision has value in addition to the generic language proposed in CoP19 Doc 7.4 in Annex 1. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I see Zambia, followed by Guinea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add our voice to what has already been said on the services rendered by MIC and CITES. Zambia has been one of the range countries which has highly benefited from these programs, and we would like to appeal that they continue, because we've benefited. We have more than 4 sites in our country. So I would like to put our voice and say we are supporting the recommendations as read out by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Zambia. Guinea, you have the floor.
Merci,
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to MIC, given everything that has been done in our region, we think it certainly would be a good thing to support the program, and we would hope that that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea. So I think the parties are generally in support of the recommendations. I will open the floor if observers would like to add anything in our discussions. Observers? I don't see any observers, so that's a simple one for me. So thank you, everyone. The Secretariat's just reminding me about the decisions. So I think that we agree to the decisions outlined in Annex 1, decisions 19AA, 19BB, and 19CC. I did hear the US supporting the amendment to 19BB, paragraph A, that the work be subject to external resources. I don't see any opposition. This is familiar to us. Okay, so I think that that is the conclusion of this committee, that we agree, and also that we agree, just note that the Secretariat has recommended that the committee consider deleting decisions 18.21 and 18.22. I didn't hear any specific comment on that in the discussion, but I would propose that we agree with the Secretariat on that point, given that those decisions have been implemented. Okay, thank you. So, parties, observers, welcome to this morning. We have reached 9 a.m. 7 hours ago. We will get there. So we will take CoP19 document 48, definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. This document has been submitted by the Standing Committee. I'll ask the Chair of the Standing Committee to introduce the document. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you. So document COP19, Doc 48, was prepared by the Standing Committee, and it responds to the directions provided in decisions 18.152 to 18.156 on definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. Paragraphs 4 through 14 of the document describe the actions of the Secretariat and the Animals Committee to respond to the decisions directed to them. During the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee heard a report from the Animals Committee in compliance with the decisions directed to them. After hearing the report, the Standing Committee agreed to invite the Conference of the Parties to, as outlined in paragraph 21, approve the non-binding best practice guidance on how to determine whether the trade would promote in situ conservation contained in Annex 1 of the present document. To approve the non-binding guidance for determining whether a proposed recipient of a living specimen of African elephant and or southern rhinoceros is suitably equipped to house and care for it, contained in Annex 2. To adopt the draft decisions, which are found in Annex 3 of the document, in order to complete the directions from COP18 that we were unable to complete during this intersessional period. And then finally, to delete decisions 18.152 to 18.156. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Standing Committee. Parties, the floor is open. I see the United States of America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States generally supports the recommendations in document COP19, document 48. The United States was an active member of the working group on appropriate and acceptable destinations and supports approval of the guidance in Annexes 1 and 2. We take note of and support the Secretariat's proposal that the guidance documents be made available to the parties on the CITES webpage, appropriate and acceptable destinations, along with other helpful guidance and information. With regard to the draft decisions, we support the intent of the Secretariat's proposed amendments to 19AA(a). However, taking into account the Secretariat's suggestion that the notification to parties be issued later in time to account for giving parties an opportunity to make use of the guidance, and given that the guidance documents are or will be posted on the webpage, we recommend that decision 19AA(a) be simplified further to read the following. Issue a notification to the parties within 1 year of the close of the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, inviting feedback on experience with using the guidance documents and other information provided on the CITES webpage, appropriate and acceptable destinations. We oppose the Secretariat's other proposed amendments to 19AA little b, 19BB, and 19CC. We continue to believe that these decisions should be party-driven and ensure the committees play an important role in deciding whether to recommend updates to the guidance. Finally, the United States supports the deletion of decisions 18.152 to 18.156 as work has been completed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam Chair. The expression appropriate and acceptable destinations has been a problem for us because we do think that there are some ethical issues involved. We find people feeling entitled to send animals to environments that they do not come from, and that as long as they are properly documented. We have never been in favor of that kind of transfer of animals. Say elephants or giraffes, those major species for us, there can be in situ conservation, which will then lead to socio-economic activities that will generate conservation. Now, I know we're short of time, Madam, but bear with me. I found myself in a zoo in Spain where I saw elephants and giraffes, but I really must say I was moved to tears when an elephant came to me, bowed his head, raised his head, opened out his ears, and made it very clear to me that he was not happy. You need to these animals have to be put in places where there's heating available for them. We find in Africa that isn't a problem. The feed made available to them in these European zoos is not appropriate either. So all of this is a problem. And it seems to me that you have to get a little bit manipulative with ethical considerations. We are not happy with appropriate acceptable destinations, and we find that there are ethical issues that have to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of the EU and the member states who participated actively in the intersessional working group, which developed these two guidance documents, we would like to express our full support to the content of both documents, and we think that they provide useful considerations for all parties involved in this trade. We therefore support the adoption of the two non-binding guidance documents, as well as the set of draft decisions presented in Annex 3 of this document, which will allow parties to provide their feedback on the use of the guidance on housing and care for these species. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I see Burkina Faso.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, the question of appropriate and acceptable destinations is rather unclear language as we see it. There is no more appropriate destination than the environment that is native to that species. As Senegal has just said, all you have to do is to go to some zoos to see what the facts are. And it isn't always easy to see animals in such zoo conditions. We have been for some time now, the countries that are members of the African Elephant Coalition have opposed to this whole question of appropriate and acceptable destinations. We think that it's difficult to transfer animals, and we are opposed to it. That said, we do feel that we can have a continuing exchange of views and find some solution. We can't accept things as they currently stand in the document, but we are open to discussion so that we can come to an agreement on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. We have a few documents that touch on the concepts that you've raised and Senegal has raised. So I think we will have opportunity to discuss some of the topics that you raised, particularly in the next few documents that we'll discuss. I am interested to hear party views on this document, particularly around whether or not we can adopt the non-binding guidance and the new draft decisions. So I have several parties. I'm going to close my list because I have a lot of parties asking for the list, and I think we probably want to focus just on these recommendations right now. So I will ask for brief. I'm going to enforce my time limit, sort of. I'm going to enforce my unenforced time limit of please approximately 2 minutes, and I will take comments from the parties on my list particularly on the recommendations outlined in the document. So please, Ethiopia followed by Zimbabwe. Ethiopia.
Thank you, Chair. As it is the first time to take the floor, Ethiopia would like to extend its deepest gratitude and appreciation to the people and the government of Panama for hosting this important conference, and the Secretariat for the wonderful work to organize the COP. Madam Chair, Ethiopia strongly supports the suggestions pointed out by Senegal and Burkina Faso. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As Zimbabwe, we support the adoption of the two non-binding best practice guidance documents, as they would allow new lessons to be learned. We also support the adoption of the draft recommendations as proposed in document 48 I submit.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Eswatini, you have the floor, followed by Niger. Eswatini, I think we've lost you. If you want the floor again, please press your button. I'll give it to you. If not, I don't see you, Eswatini. I'll go to Niger. If you come back on my list, I will go to you. Niger, please.
Okay. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The expression appropriate destinations involves actually moving a species to an alien place where it cannot live as it chooses in very restricted conditions. It's hard to understand exactly what is done and what guidelines are in place when an animal is moved to another destination, and what is done to ensure that it really is an appropriate destination. I do really feel that the Secretariat needs to address this issue, because you can find that there is information made available, but then in time it turns out that the destination was not appropriate. So we are not really happy with the terminology as laid out in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do have Eswatini back, so we'll give you another turn. Eswatini, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As it's the first time we take the floor, we'd like to congratulate you on your appointment as chairmanship of this committee, and we'd like to extend our gratitude to the government of Panama for this excellent hosting of this conference. Madam Chair, we would like to register our support of this document and the recommendations of the non-binding provisions which have been brought forward from these working groups, and we'd like to register our support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini. And my final party is Togo. Togo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank Senegal, Burkina Faso, and Niger for the arguments put forward. They were very clear, and Togo shares their concerns, and we are opposed to this document and its decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. So I think this is also a reasonably straightforward one to sum up for me. There is one question I do have for parties. I did want to see if there was any interest from observers before I do so in speaking on this document. So I will take 2 observers. I will take the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and I will take AWI. Iaza, you have the floor.
Thank you. Since this is the first time EASA takes the floor, we would like to thank the government of Panama for their warm welcome and excellent hosting of COP19. We also congratulate you, Chair, for your exemplary leadership of this committee. This brief intervention is made on behalf of AZA, EASA, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, WASA, WCS, and ZSL. Our organizations support the 4 recommendations under point 21 in document 48 on the definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. We urge parties to adopt all 4 points and, most importantly, the 2 non-binding guidance documents as presented in Annex 1 and Annex 2. These are representative of a vetted and comprehensive approach to both in-situ conservation and the best standards of care. We also welcome parties to utilize the assets of our organizations have to offer in these 2 areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Iaza. AWI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the Animal Welfare Institute, Born Free, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, Eurogroup for Animals, Fondation Franz Weber, Humane Society International, Pro-Wildlife, Robin Dubois, and the Species Survival Network. We thank the distinguished delegates from Senegal, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Togo for expressing their concerns about this document, and we share those concerns. We would also like to emphasize that the working group which developed the draft guidance as currently proposed by the Standing Committee in COP19 Doc 48 Annex 1 did not reach a consensus. We are concerned that the draft guidance assumes without evidence that ex situ trade promotes in situ conservation. The guidance also ignores the special provision concerning African elephants in paragraph 1 of Resolution COMP 11.20 Rev COP 18, which indicates that the export of African elephants to ex situ locations will not benefit the in situ conservation of the species. The same paragraph also provides that the IUCN Elephant Specialist Group and the Animals Committee must be consulted when considering transfers to ex situ locations in exceptional circumstances. The IUCN Species Survival Commission's African Elephant Specialist Group's position is that the export of wild-caught African elephants to an ex situ location has no direct benefit for in situ conservation. Consequently, the non-binding best practice guidance on how to determine whether ex situ trade would promote in situ conservation should explicitly exclude African elephants, and the guidance on how to determine whether an ex situ location is suitably equipped for African elephants should not apply to elephants derived from wild populations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AWI. So I would like to sum up, as I said, with one question for parties. So I think the committee has agreed to recommend the adoption of the two non-binding guidances, so I'll read their names. The non-binding best practice guidance on how to determine whether the trade would promote in situ conservation, contained in Annex 1, and the non-binding guidance for determining whether a proposed recipient of a live specimen of African elephant and or southern white rhinoceros is suitably equipped to house and care for it, contained in Annex 2. I heard support for the draft decisions presented in Annex 3. I did hear the US's support for the Secretariat's amendments to Decision 19AA, paragraph A, but with some edits to simplify the paragraph. So if I have the edits correct there, I'll read them out and see. I didn't hear any opposition to them, and I think it certainly does simplify the paragraph and also addresses some of the concerns we've heard about 90 days after the meeting perhaps being too soon to gather the legitimate experiences of parties in using these documents. So 19AA directed to the Secretariat. The Secretariat shall, paragraph A, issue a notification to the parties within 1 year of the close of the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, inviting feedback on experience with using the guidance, and then we would strike the majority of this paragraph. So it would read, with using the guidance provided on the CITES webpage, appropriate and acceptable destinations. So I do think that's a simplification. Functionally, the two changes that the US has proposed is a change in the timing of the issue of the notification, and they've just generalised the reference to all the guidance that's on the appropriate and acceptable destinations webpage. I will give parties a moment to see if that's an acceptable amendment to Decision 19AA. We could, of course, I heard mostly support for the decisions themselves as written in the annex. I just wanted to put forward that simplification that the US helpfully provided. Not seeing any opposition to that, so I think we will move forward with the suggestion from the United States there. So we are agreeing to the decisions outlined in Annex 3 with the Secretariat's amendments to paragraph little a of Decision 19AA with the US's amendments that I've just read out. And we recommend the deletion of decisions 18.152 to 18.156 as they've been implemented. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will move on to item 66.4, trade in live elephants. We have two documents. 66.4.1, international trade in live African elephant specimens, proposed revision to Resolution Conf 10.10, Rev CoP 18 on trade in elephant specimens, and document 66.4.2, clarifying the framework proposal of the European Union. Now, I would propose to take these documents together. So I would invite the proponents of 66.4.1 to introduce their document first, and then I will ask the European Union to introduce their document second. Okay, I see Burkina Faso requesting the floor. Burkina Faso, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Burkina Faso is submitting document 66.4.1 alongside several members of the Coalition for the African Elephant, which brings together a number of African countries. This document is a follow-up to the previous COP and the previous meeting of the Standing Committee. It proposes a single solution for the regulation of live elephants as part of the CITES. During the previous COP, CITES parties clearly expressed their will to limit or regulate the trade of live caught elephants to the natural or historical range of that species. According to the IUCN SSC African Elephant Specialist Group, sending species beyond the continent has no benefit for their in situ conservation. Often, the capture methods and the living conditions of captured elephants are particularly poor. This applies to all African elephants, regardless of which country they were captured in. Despite the clear will expressed by parties during COP18, the current regulation leaves a legal grey area which is exploited by parties to export countries beyond the continent to the detriment of wild species and populations. In 2019, exports were recorded from Zimbabwe, and in 2022, Namibia exported live species. This was brought to the attention of the CITES Convention during SC 74 this year, and it was also brought to the attention of civil society. Our proposal, as the Coalition for African Elephants, sets out a clear solution for this situation, and we carry the voice of parties who took a stand during COP18. We propose a single and simple solution which could be implemented immediately and put an end to these discussions once and for all. Because for several years now, the issue of elephants has been discussed at length. And we feel that some parties have not been listened to. By adding a paragraph to Conf 1010 Rev COP18, we can limit trade in live wild-caught African elephants to in situ locations, that is to say, in Africa. Madam Chair, African elephants have no place in captivity, and even less so on the other side of the world. The proposal would delay a decision on this issue up until COP20 and suggests a procedure which is lacking in transparency and clarity. And in the meantime, the export of elephants will continue to their detriment. Now, I believe that all of us here have a shared objective, which is to resolve this issue now and not delay it any further. This is even more relevant given the will expressed by some parties to export African elephants to the other side of the world. This is not realistic, and we wish to address this issue once and for all. And therefore, we urge you to support our proposal and to reject other proposals which would only serve to postpone the issue to a later date. For example, the proposal put forward by the European Union. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. I will invite the European Union to introduce document 66.4.2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. As we have already mentioned during the Standing Committee in Lyon, we stand ready to work together with the African elephant range states to develop a coherent legal framework for the trade in live elephants. It is clear that the current framework has led to different interpretations and risks us losing ourselves in long legal discussions. So we have formulated a way forward in which we've tried to take the different views of parties in this matter into account. Trade in live elephants can be done for commercial purposes or not, depending on the appendix in which the population is listed. Above all, it should be done in a transparent manner which will generate conservation benefits. To arrive at such an unambiguous framework, changes will need to be done to the relevant resolutions as well as the elephant annotation itself. This was also the reason why we've incorporated our thoughts on the issue of reservations to annotations in this document, although it is clear that it goes beyond the discussion on elephants. We will therefore not come back to our arguments in that discussion and are convinced this will be resolved at this COP, which will be needed to make progress on the matter on elephants. In our document, we have proposed several options. First and foremost, we think it would be useful to have a dedicated chapter on trade in live African elephants in the resolution 10.10. This would be based on the current existing conditions in resolution conf 11.20, ref CoP18, and should also refer to the just adopted non-binding best practice guidances discussed under the previous agenda item. We have suggested concrete language for this in paragraph 17 of this document. A similar action could be envisaged in a later stage for the white rhino, which could then lead to the deletion of ResConf 11.20. At the same time, the necessary changes should be introduced to annotation 2 applicable to African elephants. When we revise the annotation for African elephants, it should no longer include references to resolutions. Given the complexity and sensitivity of this discussion, we've suggested calling a CITES dialogue meeting as per resolution conf 14.5, allowing all African elephant range states to consider these options. In the hope common ground can be found, as we are convinced that all range states share a common goal to manage the remaining elephant populations in a manner consistent with the objectives of CITES. We sincerely hope this suggestion is given a chance, and we call upon everyone to work together constructively so we can turn a page in this discussion. So while we share the goals of the proponents of document 66.4.1, as just explained, we do not support the suggested approach. It does not recognize the delicate compromise reached at COP18 and the need for exceptional circumstances under which a transfer could be envisaged towards ex situ locations. It also would mean that trade in captive held elephants that were taken from the wild at some point in the past could only go towards in situ locations, which would not be in the best interest for many of such captive held animals. Thirdly, the proponent does not suggest any change to ResConf 11.20 RevCop 18 on appropriate and acceptable destinations, in which the conditions for such trade in live elephants is now defined. If this proposal in document 66.4.1 were to be adopted, it would result in conflicting and contradicting elements in both resolutions, whereas it would not solve the remaining legal interpretation issues in the annotation applicable to elephants. So we repeat our call upon all African elephant range states to consider working together to resolve these issues, as we have suggested in our proposal, and we hope for broad support for this way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. So we have 2 documents on trade in live elephants before us. Document 66.4.1, as introduced by Burkina Faso, recommends that the parties consider adopting amendments to Resolution Conf 1010 RevCop 18 on trade in elephant specimens that they have outlined in Annex 1. Document 66.4.2 from the European Union invites parties to take note of their document, and they provide draft decision for consideration in Annex 1. So these are important issues. I would like to begin discussions. It's 4:15. I would like to have discussions for the rest of this afternoon on this matter. So I will begin where we are. Benin, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Benin wishes to support the proposals made by Burkina Faso, supporting recommendations contained in document 66.4.1. We object to the proposal put forward by the European Union in document 66.4.2. Between 2010 and 2022, a number of elephants were exported, in particular from Namibia, Eswatini, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. And these exports have been controversial in some cases and have led to a reaction from civil society and CITES parties. Several of these elephants have met a tragic fate during travel or at their final destination. Taking this into account, and as was highlighted by Senegal, it's important to keep these animals in their environment, especially given that there is not necessarily a benefit in terms of in situ conservation. This is why Benin supports the proposal explained by Burkina Faso and rejects the European Union's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, document 66.4.1 provides exactly what the COP adopted at the last conference of parties, and also the Standing Committee in its meeting, the 74th meeting. It was a clear and a uniform legal framework that applies to exports of live wild-caught African elephants. These proposed measures that are now in this document will treat all African elephants equally, whether they are in Appendix 1 or 2, because once the animals are captured and sent to captivity, the impacts on their biological conditions do not recognize which CITES appendix the animal is on. Madam Chair, the solution is to ensure that the African elephants are not captured from their wild family groups, transported to the others to captivity, and then live the rest of their lives in captivity in conditions that are not suitable for the species. The proposal 66.4.1 is in line with the recommendation of the experts and the IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group. We therefore will recommend for the COP to adopt the document submitted by Burkina Faso. And Madam Chair, if there will be a call for a dialogue, let it be a dialogue that focuses on the challenges that faces the African elephant conservation and management in its entirety, not only focused on live trade. I thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, we as Zimbabwe are concerned that parties with no practical or hands-on experience on successful elephant conservation sometimes make the most noise on a subject matter which does not directly affect them. However, we take note of the valuable comments made by the Secretariat as we make this submission. Madam Chair, we totally opposed to document 66.4.2. As Zimbabwe, we welcome the suggestion by the EU in document 66.4.2 to establish a common framework for trade in live African elephants. This allows dialogue and consultation to go on as we seek a long-term solution to this issue. Furthermore, the document makes a suggestion of a number of options which are practical in Zimbabwe's view. Hence, there is need to further discuss the options in the document. We recommend the adoption of the draft decisions contained in the Annex 1 of the same document. I so submit, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Mali, you have the floor.
Merci bien, Madame la... Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if you'll allow me, I would like to put forward an idea. It has been proven that every individual has their own birthplace. Today, we all have a birth certificate which can be used by our parents to allow us to attend schools and to one day become someone like everyone in this room. Ever since the inception of CITES, almost 50 years ago, the same resources are suffering, are in agony. Now it's time for us to act. We've seen several Secretary Generals at CITES, and range states have always continued to experience difficulties when it comes to conservation of their animals. Our communities are suffering from not being able to benefit from the conservation of these species. their final destination ends up being a prison for these animals, be it in a zoo or in a ranch, for example. The proposal, which has just been put forward, constitutes an important and robust document which has been developed with the support of 32 range states, part of the African Elephant Coalition, who have been working since 2008 to manage these populations and to regulate trade. Today, the proposal which has been put forward by our brothers and sisters from Benin, Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Ethiopia, Liberia, Niger, Senegal, and Togo is the fruit of a common process. This proposal would provide parties with a clear legal framework to regulate all Appendix 1 and 2 listed African elephant species. When it comes to the trade of live wild-caught African elephants, they should be limited to secure areas. Today, we're not allowed to take kangaroos from Australia and bring them to the Mali desert. We don't bring alligators from Australia to Mali. And we cannot do this either when it comes to the Komodo dragon, because they should be in their rightful place. And this also applies to elephants. We must demonstrate wisdom. One day, otherwise, our great-grandchildren will no longer know what an elephant is. I've been taking part in these meetings since 1974, and it's time now for us to find a solution and to stop the bleeding. Elephants must remain within their ecosystem alongside their local communities. Therefore, I wish to recognize all states who support protecting these elephants alongside us. As you've mentioned, CITES is based on consensus and dialogue. This is what we advocate for. But ultimately, as Senegal, Burkina Faso, and others have mentioned, we must take into account this wisdom, and I urge you to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. Botswana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Botswana is not in a position to accept the amendment to ResConf 1010 as revised at CoP18, as proposed by the proponents of Docu 66.4.1. Botswana wishes to once again express our concern regarding the manner in which annotation 2 to the listing of our elephant population, which makes reference to trade in live elephants, was amended at CoP19. At CoP18, I beg your pardon. We maintain that the substantive amendments to listings must be guided by the procedure outlined in Article 15 of the Convention. Chair, we are keen to work with parties to resolve the challenges that have been brought about as a consequence of the unfortunate situation that arose at COP18. It would be most unfortunate if the proposed amendment is accepted, as it will complicate efforts to develop a clear and transparent regime for trade in live elephants. If the proposal is accepted, Botswana would be constrained to implement the revised resolution as proposed in Doc 66.4.1. Botswana welcomes the decision proposed in document 66.4.2 by the EU as a way forward to address this complex matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. I will take Niger, followed by Namibia. Niger, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Chair, an animal species can only be comfortable in its natural environment. An elephant, an African elephant, would feel more comfortable at home in harmony in its ecosystem. Niger supports the proposal made by Burkina Faso and others in document 6641 and supports the statements made by Benin, Kenya, and Mali. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Niger. Namibia, you have the floor. Technicians, can you give Namibia the floor, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Namibia appreciates the two documents under discussion and therefore thanks the proponent for preparing them. We support the efforts by the proponent to clarify the conditions for a legal framework for trade in live African elephants, as long as that will remain within the provision of the text of the convention. Chairperson, we find some contents of CoP19 document 66.4.1 about Namibia to be inaccurate and misleading. At this juncture, Madam Chair, allow us to respectfully inform this meeting that Namibia has never violated the text of the convention in any of her trade transactions, and we have no intentions to do so going forward. Yes, we exported live elephants outside its natural distribution range, but still within the provisions of the text of the convention. So we have never violated the text of the convention. We have been very transparent in our dealings. We will continue to be transparent, and we are ready to engage. Having said that, Chairperson, Namibia strongly believes that it's important to find a common ground and move with consensus. However, we do not believe that the proposed amendments to Resolution 1010 contained in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 66.4.1 can help us to achieve that. We therefore do not support those proposed amendments. We believe that the proposed way forward contained in CoP19 Doc 66.4.2 will yield the desired results. As a result, Chairperson, we support the adoption of decisions contained in document 66.4.2. I thank you.
Thank you, Namibia. I see the United Kingdom, followed by the United States, followed by the United Arab Emirates. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK strongly supports the need for a clear framework for trade in live African elephants and welcomes the efforts of both 66.4.1 and 66.4.2 to achieve this. With regards to 66.4.1, we thank the proponents for their proposal, which we consider could be part of the solution, but we note the discussions held at the last COP on the need to provide flexibility for exceptional or emergency situations. With regard to 66.4.2, we welcome this thoughtful analysis, which is helpful in moving the discussion forwards. It remains the UK's view that the trade in live wild African elephants should only occur to countries within the species' natural and historical range, and for the purposes of conservation, except in specified exceptional circumstances. However, we do recognise that this is a complex issue that divides opinion, and so we are keen that a solution is found that range states can agree to, that delivers effective conservation of elephants and that supports the people who live alongside them. For this reason, we feel this issue warrants further detailed and careful discussion. With that in mind, we support the comments of Burkina Faso in wanting to address this issue as a matter of urgency. It would therefore be our preference that we make the most of the time we have here in Panama to try and make progress on this important issue. But we do recognise that this may also need an intersessional process as recommended by the EU and its member states. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks the member states for submitting proposals 66.4.1 and 66.4.2 for both the live trade in elephant specimens and a clarifying framework. We support further dialogue and appreciate its urgency. Specifically, regarding document 66.4.1, the United States does not support adopting the amendments to Resolution CONF 10.10. We feel it is premature to adopt these amendments without further discussion. For example, the text as proposed provides no exceptions for emergency or exceptional circumstances that provide in situ conservation benefits. Regarding document 66.4.2, we generally support paragraph C of the draft decision 19AA, as we believe that further consideration of the conditions to trade in live African elephants is warranted. With regard to paragraphs A and B of the draft decision, we believe that these issues are being addressed in the discussion under document 88. Further, to the development of a common framework for trade in live elephants, we support additional dialogue, including consideration of possibly moving relevant sections of Resolution CONF 11.20 to a dedicated chapter on trade in live elephants in Resolution CONF 10.10, but note concerns with some of the text presented in the document CoP19 66.4.2. Finally, the United States published a Federal Register notice today regarding new proposed requirements for trade in live elephants under our stricter domestic measure, the U.S. Endangered Species Act, and we invite comments from range countries and the public on this proposed rule. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. United Arab Emirates, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the document 66.4.1, the UAE would like to reiterate its long-standing position to proactively work to promote a culture of biodiversity conservation at home and abroad. Protecting wildlife and ensuring its sustainability is one of our strategic priorities. The UAE's commitment to protect species and their habitats is reflected in our national strategies and global aim programs. We have supported and continued to support scientific research and efforts globally to ensure that the planet's wildlife is sustainable and effectively conserved. One of the many programs, and to give an example of one in this scenario, is the reintroduction of Sumatra horned oryx, an animal that was extinct in the wild, and the UAE have invested tremendous resources in, and the species now is back and to its origin and currently thriving. With regards to the particular case highlighted in this document, the UAE, the Secretariat, and Namibia have clarified that this operation was legal and within the mandate of the Convention as well as the relevant international standards. We have ensured the highest levels of care and established outstanding world-class facilities for the imported animals. According to the reports that we received from the Namibian Scientific Authority, the elephants that were exported to the UAE were captured from commercial farming areas and were then exported to facilities specialized in the care of these species. Once the elephants arrived to the UAE, they were met with specialized veterinary teams and ensured that they were healthy and safe, and their arrival to the facilities was carried out with the highest standards of operation, which included their safety and the safety of the public. And the elephants are still receiving the best available care. The elephants were kept in well-established facilities with the highest operational equipments in a place to ensure the elephant safety and health are met with experienced team in order to enhance the efforts to conserve and protect endangered species and to develop education and awareness programs on the importance of conserving an endangered species. With the import of the elephants, no violation of CITES provisions have taken place. All the relevant permits, approvals, including CITES permits, were obtained and issued in line with Article 3 of the CITES Convention. In addition, as an extra measure, the UAE had contacted the CITES certificate team to ensure that correct measure were taken before issuing any of the elephant CITES certificates. Certificates were issued according to the received recommendation by the Secretariat. Therefore, we strongly request that the data and the information is verified and taken from reliable resources regarding these matters or any other matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. I'm closing my speaking list for parties for today. We have just under 20 minutes. I'm not going to tell you who's on the list because I will have to take you one by one. If everyone keeps to just a few minutes of intervention, we will be able to hear from all of you today. That will not be the end of our discussions. It's clear to me we need to continue with these. So I will take parties one by one, but please, I've indicated that if you are considerate and keep to time, we will hear from all of the parties who've requested the floor today. So Guinea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think that those who've already taken the floor have really said what we wanted to say. Our position is clear. We strongly support the proposal made by Burkina Faso, and we are happy to join the high number of governments that also support it. Madam, we would vote in favor of this proposal and encourage others to do so. I would, in conclusion, say that for anyone interested in conservation, the immediate environment is a vital concern because habitat and species are inextricably linked. And I think that is the way that we should understand the world. African elephants are better off in Africa than anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea. United Republic of Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us an opportunity to speak on this. Tanzania wishes to commend effort by EU in developing the document 66.4.2 in effort to develop a common framework that we find will be useful in ensuring that trade in live elephants is done in a way that complies with the existing convention. And Tanzania opposed the proposal by African Elephant Coalition Group of amending the resolution COP 1010 as it is premature at this time to amend this resolution, taking into account the differences in conservation ideology which has transcending within this room. Therefore, Tanzania will be happy to join intersection working group if the committee will resolve so. We submit, Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. Up until now, it seems to me you have guided our work most ably, but I would suggest that one thing may have escaped your notice. The author of... There was one proposal I found rather awkward, and that is Zimbabwe. I don't think that the idea is that the parties with no experience can determine what we do with respect to the exchange or trade in elephants. I don't think anyone really can be consider themselves an expert in matters like this. And I do think it would be careful to ensure that people, when they take the floor, make sure that they are careful in their use of language. And I think everybody here has rights and should not be treated as they have no experience. So I'm not referring to a speaker, but rather an author of a text. I think we have to recognize that all of us are fully empowered representatives of our countries and have to be treated with respect. That said, we are co-authors of the document presented, 6641. We are all environmentalists, and you have to recognize that it's no accident that African elephants are in Africa and not in Europe, and everything has to be done to make sure that they can thrive in Africa. So if 6642 seems to me to be a European Union strategy to develop so they can have African elephants. However, to say that we have no experience in these matters is simply not correct, and I won't accept it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan appreciates the efforts of the proponents of two documents to clarify the term of the legal framework for the living African elephant trade. We understand the need for further discussion on this complex issue, which causes different difficulties for range states to make decisions on a trade in live elephants. In this regard, as with the Secretariat's comments on Doc 66.4.2, we would like to support the process of continuing the discussion proposed in that document, rather than the amendment resolution 10.10 as proposed by the document 66.4.1. Furthermore, for document 66.1, we believe that it is necessary to take into account the opinions of range states rather than the proponent's country to respect sovereign rights to manage their biological resources. Therefore, when no consensus is reached among the range states, we do not support this proposal. Regarding the draft decision 19.AAC in Doc 66.2, we believe that this issue should be resolved in a way satisfactory to range states which have population lists in the Appendix 2, and especially those that express the reservation. Japan also reiterates its strong position that related discussion should be based on the facts and the best reliable science, not assumption. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I have 4 more speakers and 10 minutes, so we're on time. So I will take Togo. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At COP18, the EU publicly stated its opposition to the export of live African elephants that were wild caught, that were exported in the interest of ex situ conservation. And we welcome that brave position. However, today, the European Union seems to be backtracking in document 66.4.2. This document seems to work against the straightforward solution proposed by African range states in 66.4.1. The proposal made by the European Union means that any decision would be postponed to COP20 in 3 years' time. And that means that our elephants would be at serious risk. There could well be dozens of elephants wild caught and sent to zoos at the other end of the planet, even though the European Union has opposed such transactions because of their adverse impacts on the elephants caught and the wild population in general. We could deal with this problem by adopting 66.4.1. Now, the European Union does not have any elephants. I don't think it has any lessons to give Africa on how to manage its elephant population and should not postpone any decision taking here within CITES. 66.4.2 should be rejected. We would further point out that we have document 88 deals with reservations. So this is not relevant to the EU document. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Togo. Eswatini, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd first like to address the issue of the export of elephants from Eswatini, as mentioned earlier. I'd like to state that this transfer happened entirely legally. All documentation was adhered to, and the process was fully compliant. Furthermore, the facilities they went to were well evaluated and had all the considerations taken in terms of their suitability. It's also a matter of record that substantial conservation benefits have been seen from that transfer in Eswatini for elephants as well as other species, including endangered black rhinos and threatened white rhinos. This has also been especially helpful during the COVID-19 pandemic, when our revenue base, being 89% tourism derived, collapsed for 2 years. And this project has been very useful for the long-term support of our conservation work. I'd like then to look at these two documents. I feel that document 66.4.1 seeks to shortcut dialogue and possibly avoid some issues in discussion. And we therefore feel that 66.4.1 should not be supported. We also feel that the European Union has applied its mind and is looking for an inclusive solution to what really is a very complex issue. And there are many, many sides to consider in this issue. This would benefit from the suggested way forward, which document 66.4.2 has suggested through the European Union, and we therefore support that 66.4.2 is accepted. And we would further align our comments, or we would further align with the comments of Botswana regarding the processes which occurred during COP18 and the adoption of some of the text we're dealing with now. Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini. Liberia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Liberia is one of the ring states of the African elephants. As such, Liberia considers it unacceptable to continue to subject this iconic African species to such a tragedy by keeping elephants in captivity in the need of trade. Liberia therefore aligned itself with Senegal, Burkina Faso, and Benin, and therefore rejects the EU proposal. I submit, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Liberia, and I will take Zambia. Zambia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief as guided. As Zambia, we feel the proponents of the document ignore the views of Southern Africa range states, who currently possess the vast majority of wild African elephants. And we daily have to deal with matters of human-wildlife conflict, diminishing range, and issues of carrying capacity due to the huge populations of elephants which we have in the region exceeding 200,000. It is from this background that we reject the proposed revision to Resolution Conf 10.10 of REV CoP18, submitted by Benin, Burkina Faso et al. We believe the contentious issue of trade in live wild elephants deserves significantly more time for full and fair discussion by parties and other stakeholders. So from this, we're in support of what the European Union has suggested in document 66.4.2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zambia. So we have reached just a few minutes before 5. I haven't had an opportunity to take observers in this discussion, so I will not end our discussions here. I will restart them first thing in the morning to hear from some observers. Then I will give the opportunity back to the parties if there's any additional views that you want to share. Overnight, I will think about where we might go from here. I would encourage parties who are particularly interested, if you have the opportunity, to talk with your colleagues and see if you can find any other ways forward that we haven't heard from today. So with that, and reminding you that first thing tomorrow, we will go through summary records 2 and 3 of this committee, first thing. I'll turn to the Secretariat to see if there's any housekeeping. No housekeeping from the Secretariat, but they've asked me to remind you that Committee 1 is meeting for its night session this evening from 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. So for those of you joining for that, 7 p.m. next door, Committee 1. And come early, as I've been reminding you, please come early. I know there are side events and they're very enjoyable ways to spend your evening, but it did take us 25 minutes to make quorum last night, and I wish next door better. So please enjoy your evenings if you have the evening off, enjoy your night sessions if you are staying on, and I will see you early tomorrow morning.